How many of you guys have heard these leads suck? These leads don't answer the phone. They say that they never inquired. And we hear this from our agents a lot, but the thing is, they're not wrong. They did not inquire. This is why we've really started breaking down what species these leads are.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Real Estate First Friday. My name is Fermin, Executive VP here at LPT Realty, and I will be joined this morning by Lauren Bowen North. Let's go ahead and bring in Lauren immediately onto this call so I can say good morning to her. Good morning, Lauren.
Good morning. How are you today?
I am doing fabulous. August has begun. We are getting, clicking right through Q3 of the year, and it's going to be Q4 immediately. I mean, this morning I had parent-teacher meeting or meet the teacher this morning for school. Here in Florida, we start next week. I know in California, I spoke with some agents. They were starting this week already. So summer's gone.
It is. This year's gone almost, I feel like.
Yeah, it blows by real quickly. All right, guys. So today we are going to be discussing a topic called lead species. So for many of us that may not know who Lauren Bowen is, she's probably has ran some of the top lead sources in the industry with your previous experience at Robert Slack, which was one of the biggest teams in the industry on leads. Do you mind maybe sharing a little bit of your background for some of those that may not know your previous life before LPT?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been very fortunate to have been with LPT for a year and a half now, and that time is flying by. Lead sources are what I've been working on probably for exclusively for at least 5 to 6 years now. So 24 different lead sources, everything from Realtor.com to Zillow, both market-based pricing and preferred. There are some lead sources through the Realtor.com products that we did product development for, getting those into existing products now. So everything from Listing Toolkit, UpNest, HomeLight, Divvy, Redfin, Sold.com. So those lead sources of what I've helped teams work on, convert, make profitable for their teams, get ROIs on. So lead sources have been my realm for quite some time now.
Yeah. And the thing with the lead sources, right? Like not all leads as they come in are made equal. Oftentimes as agents, we want to treat every lead as the same. But the reality is the intent behind the lead or the intent of the consumer as the lead is flowing in is very different from lead source, from lead to lead. And you're in an interesting vantage point in that you've seen how this industry has morphed or how the lead distribution industry has morphed from, where, there was this economic relationship with the agent called market-based pricing back in the day. Some lead sources obviously still have that economic game plan to it transitioning into the success-based pricing type of format, what it means for the intention of the leads and the quality of the lead. And recently with AI, how is AI impacting that quality of the lead, that we are ultimately receiving for that investment. So today we're going to unpack all of the above. So I'm going to quarterback the mic back to you. I think you have a slide deck that we're going to share today.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and show it. You're absolutely correct on that. So, and I think for years, we've really been talking about the lead sources and everything. And this year, we actually really did pivot to lead species because you're correct. AI came into the game, but also sources no longer really broke down how leads needed to be handled. Talking about lead sources, we've told everyone for years, make sure you're handling them differently, but really they are completely different species now. And so we are kind of changing the terms around how we talk about them to make sure that our teams are actually working them correctly. So lead species is where we have landed with this. So the first one, we actually call these password leads. So Lewis and I have worked a lot together over the past year and a half, I guess it is. But some of these lead sources we've seen are password leads. So the access behind these was not intent, though. And that's where a lot of these teams, we fall apart on the scripting right off the bat. So the home search registration leads, that is a great name that the industry called them. But they started with a search. So that's how they warranted that name. The registration brain made sense. It sounded reasonable, but it kind of tricked the agent into thinking that they were inquiring. So when the buyer says, I entered my phone number as the password to unlock the kitchen photos, it wasn't really requesting an agent to call them. So we've nicknamed these password leads. Like they wanted to see the kitchen, they wanted to see the backyard. There was not intent there for an agent to reach out to them. So this is where we really have started teaching agents and teams from surprised contact versus expected contact. So the surprise comes when they unlock the photos, then we called them and we didn't really have a reason to call them at that time. This is where your number can be ignored, blocked, they can complain, marked as spam. So this is one, we see a lot of these along like PPC lead sources. Some of you are running the Googles, you can get a lot of these depending on the keywords that you see, but it's surprise contact. What we want to be careful of when we are actually talking to these leads is that we are having a conversation and basing the conversation around the lack of intent, I want to say. We can be calling them and saying, hi, my name's Lauren Bowen North. I saw you were just browsing online. I want to take a moment to introduce myself as your realtor in the area. I know you might have just been starting your home journey, but I just want to take a moment to introduce myself, see if I can help you with anything that you need. So then we have request response leads. They asked for a response, and this is where portals start to change. So you can go on like realtor.com, whether you are on purchasing leads through them and you're on a request or a connection or market VIP, they have inquired to speak to an agent. So we do have a little bit better start conversion, compliance, and trust because they were expecting it. So we have called these request response leads. So Zillow falls in this. So we've really started breaking them out. Like, are we expecting a response or are we kind of catching them by surprise? So request response lead, Robert is, we're going to take over the industry on how we name some of these terms. So now we are request response lead. They are making a transaction relevant request. The agent's contact is an expected response. So we will be using this term a lot at LPT. You are going to hear this term very frequently used as request response leads as we start talking about some different lead sources that our large teams run, small, medium teams. I shouldn't just say large teams, but these are going to be like our realtor.coms, our Zillows. These would even be home lights. And then you will just hear us use this term because we know how to handle them. This is the species of the lead. It is a request response lead. So one of the things is that we have to be careful of is on the password leads. This is where teams can actually start to pay the price, teams or solo agents. Like you pay once for the lead, but then again, you do have economics. What happens when you are having blocked numbers, spam flags, lower answer rates, and degraded follow-up? When this happens, you start to pay in other ways. So the password leads don't just pollute the CRM, they can poison the phone channel. The deeper damage, they train good agents to distrust follow-up. They ignore their database and they believe online demand was fake. How many people, Lewis, how many teams have you talked to where they complain about bad leads?
Oh, all the time. I mean, that's the common trend, right? We subscribe to a lead source and, we, for whatever reason, are unable to convert it at different levels. And we all of a sudden say it's a bad lead, right?
Exactly. Team leaders out there, how many of you guys have heard these leads suck? These leads don't answer the phone. They say that they never inquired. And we hear this from our agents a lot, but the thing is, they're not wrong. They did not inquire. This is why we've really started breaking down what species these leads are. So they were just browsing. They were password leads. But this is really where we have to start breaking them across. And one of the things as team leaders, I would also route these differently. I would make sure my agents really understand what species they are. That way they know like these might be going to a pond. They might be going to my agents that are just learning how to handle these leads. But the first conversation is really going to set you apart when doing this. So this is what we call the Zillow inversion. I know everyone has lots of opinion on Zillow. But here was the thing that we classify when we talk about their species. The ones that we were trained to resent is the one that has always waited for the hand to go up. On Zillow, they requested a showing. They requested more info. They want to schedule a tour. Contact to these are expected. So the agent-friendly IDX vendor is the one that is extracting it as a toll, same consumer, different threshold, completely different funnel. Zillow, we really do call it the Zillow inversion because over the years, they are the ones who held steady. Like they really held the line over the years. They did not pass information through until they did one of these three things. They requested a showing, they requested more info, they wanted to schedule a tour. So they waited for the hand to go up and they held the line for all these other lead lead sources. So they kind of held the baseline. But here they actually expect a contact, and this is where they are different. Robert's all about, redefining the industry, changing the industry. We're going to redefine the terms too. Password leads, we consider browser records. Request response lead are where consumers do request more information or a callback. And we also have like live verified leads, where these are confirmed opportunities. This is how we're teaching some of our teams to actually break these down within their CRM, because this is going to teach their agents on how to handle each of these. So one of the things I think the industry did a bad job of was continuing to use the word lead for all of these. Not all of these are really leads. They are we were accessing behavior. They called it intent. When you get a lead, everyone kind of thinks they actually want information. We sold them the name lead. We believe that there was intent there. And on some of these, there actually was never intent. They just wanted to see the kitchen. So the industry sold agents access behavior, and we called it intent. And using the word lead behind all of it, I do think was an injustice upon some of these portals. So we're redefining what that looks like. So we are teaching the teams the difference between the password leads, request response lead, and live verified leads.
Let's unpack some of the vernaculars that we are using here and just make sure that the audience is understanding the differences and the importance of understanding the differences between these leads, because by us understanding the type of lead species, it will allow us to interact with the consumer in the most appropriate way. Because remember, one part of the element of our initial interactions with that customer is for us to sell ourselves. And if we are not positioning ourselves appropriately with that consumer in that first interaction, we are going to lose them. Because if they were coming in through that password lead, which let's broaden out some of that vernacular as well. So some of the industry calls this like that request, the forced registration lead, right? These are leads where a consumer maybe goes to an online portal. They'll see 3 or 4 pictures of the house as they're scrolling through that online portal, and then they get smacked with this form that says, hey, if you want to continue viewing more pictures of the house, please put in your contact information or your telephone number to unlock the additional photos. Or on the seller side, there's lead portals that will say, hey, give us your contact information and we will email you or text you a home valuation of your home. As you can hear from those calls of actions, that's not creating consumer intent. The intent behind the consumer was merely to see more pictures of the house, to receive a text message or email with their home valuation. They are not requesting to speak with a real estate professional. So as we are subscribing to these types of lead sources, lead comes in. The intent of the consumer was merely to see more pictures of the house or receive that text message with zero friction with an agent interaction, which now if we are not appropriately handling that dialogue, we will lose them, because now we're going to try to sell ourselves thinking that that consumer wants us to schedule a listing presentation or schedule a home buyer tour or something more than just merely what they provided the info on. And now we will lose them, right? Because now we're going to sound salesy, and we went in too hard without first understanding the intent of the lead. And that's really the first prong of that interaction. As any lead comes through, as you are interacting with any lead, your first mission is to unpack what is that consumer's intent? What are their goals? What are their aspirations? Why do I have their contact information before we start positioning ourselves as an expert? Because relative to what their intent is will determine how we position ourselves. A request response lead now, which is different from that password lead, as Lauren was calling it, is a consumer who is requesting now to speak with a real estate professional. So some of those calls of actions include, hey, consumer, provide us your contact information so that we can schedule an appointment with a real estate professional who will understand the factors of your home that are necessary to create a home valuation. That is a very different call of action than we will just merely text you your email you a home valuation. That consumer is wanting to speak with a real estate professional. The level of service that they are anticipating from that interaction is very different from getting surprised by that phone call that's ultimately coming in. And if we are able to understand that and understand that intent, now that conversation for us to position ourselves with that interaction is going to look very different than the previous interaction.
Absolutely. I was on with Barry Jenkins earlier this week, and he had someone say, well, they said I never inquired about this property. And I think we hear that a lot. And the factor is they actually didn't inquire about the property. You are right on that. Like they were just looking at the pictures. But one of the things I love how he changed the conversation. He was like, "Oh, I'm sorry about that. So are you looking to buy or sell your home in the next year?" It was like almost like confirming that you heard them, but also flipping the conversation around to seeing if they do have any interest in buying or selling and seeing where they land in it. So they might just be looking, they might just be starting the search. They're doing something. And I mean, at the same time, searching real estate is an American pastime at this point, but what is the intent and like how long is their intent there? Or how far out is it? I will say sometimes when we're looking at these, people will say we're 6 to 12 months out. One of the things I will tell everybody is reduce that time probably in half. If they're 6 to 12 months out, we should stay in contact with them because realistically, they're probably starting their search in three. Yeah, if they say they're starting their search in a year, I'd probably be in contact at that 3 to 6 months before then because their search will start prior to that. If we're talking to them at a year out, we're already too late to it.
Yeah, I was just going to share that stat of how many. I know you just mentioned, searching homes online has become a pastime for us. Listen to this stat, guys. At Zillow, approximately 250 million consumers view Zillow on a monthly basis, and there's only 4 million home sales in a year. I mean,
Which is insane.
Clear example of how much of a pastime just merely searching homes has become.
And that's one of the things when we start purchasing leads and when you start deciding which ones you're providing to your agents and your teams is where is the intent here? So I will say I am not bashing the PPCs by any means. I do think some teams, like they're great starter leads is another word that we've used for them. They're going to see if your agents are going to work and follow up on them, but you have to know how to handle them. You have to know the conversation around them. And that's really what the purpose of this is, how you frame your first conversation, how you frame your agents to handle them on their response. Like they didn't inquire. If they said, I saw you inquired on 123 Main Street, that's where the conversation starts shifting. So don't get me wrong. These PPCs do provide budget friendly. They're very economical. They're just going to take a little longer to get down the funnel, but they do provide teams with a lot of good opportunities that they're just going to have to follow up on. So one of the things that we want people to really go back and look at is reconsider what we've dismissed. So when we start doing our Google PPC or we start talking about leads, people really start looking at the price of them. You will get browser records for probably anywhere from $10 to $40 a lead. Sometimes the leads that are going to request a response, they are going to end probably more to anywhere from the $200 to $500 range. So this is where we really reconsider what we dismissed. And a lot of it we dismissed because of the price. So we stopped benchmarking the $10 browser records because remember, let's just think about what Lewis said. 250 million people viewing on Zillow what was that month, Lewis?
Month. Yeah, monthly.
Every month. Total yearly homes sold is 4 million. So you can tell there is a lot of browser records out there. So one of the things that I do want everyone to reconsider, direct mail, seller campaigns. I think Barry Blake even said it, his best referrals come from his listings. Events, local branding, retargeting, nurturing, ISA, inside sales. So the higher cost request response leads, do we even start going to those? But we dismiss them because of the cost. We thought the $10 option was the route to go. And in some instances, it may be what we need to do, but we really need to start looking again at what we've dismissed. We have some great marketing tools out here. I will say best in the industry. So I mean, hands down, what you guys have access to with our marketing tools are completely best in the industry. So direct mail, get some of those mailers out there, seller campaigns, the listing toolboxes, toolkits, events. So I actually can tell you all the realtors are at the farmers market on Saturday because they're there consistently every week. But at the same time, if I actually was not in the real estate industry, if I needed to sell my house, they are the ones that come to top of mind because I see them every Saturday morning. So retargeting, nurturing. This is where a lot of either the Rooster, Real Scout can come into play if you are buying some of these. That way you can wait for a triggering activity. A lot of teams have implemented inside sales associates, whether they are stateside or overseas. But then also the higher cost request response leads, maybe diversifying the lead sources a little bit. It isn't how to find cheaper leads or a grind to drain pool. It is building a machine that can afford the right leads and convert them for you. So this is also, if you are getting to what we consider the browser records, how can we actually build a machine around it? So this is where I will say, so you will sourcing over grinding, routing and speed to leads still are imperative. Accountability with your agents. And then we tend to say, now solo agents, don't kill me for this one, monetize with a solo agent, let's die. I have huge respect for the solo agents out there. You guys are probably where I say the messy middle teams are. Like you have the most on your plate. You are trying to juggle it all. So, but when it comes to the lead game, we do see a lot of solo agents not put the processes in place, which I believe Matt Hodge is launching something at 12 o'clock today to help the solo agents who are trying to. So I will say, if you're a solo agent, hop over there at 12. But again, there is some things that you can do if you are buying different levels of leads. So sourcing over grinding is very important. Routing is going to be huge. If you are getting browser records, where do you send those to? One of the things I would talk about is making sure you maybe don't send those to your top producers. Maybe you don't send them to people who are wanting high intent leads. Speed to lead is still very important. And I will say on that one, it is probably the request response to leads. I would probably not be so worried about speed to lead on browser records because, again, they were just browsing. They were looking at the kitchen. But accountability, I saw a lot in the chat. It's the lead didn't fail, the follow up did. And you're absolutely correct on that. But then also making sure team leaders that you hold your team accountable to the follow up around it.
This is great. And guys, I want you to understand like a big part of knowing this information and having the understanding of the different lead species that exist is because it's going to set you up for success. If you understand what you are getting yourself into, if you are going to drive that investment inside of the leads game or in the leads distribution game, you need to understand what you're purchasing, right? That's the best way to be the most sound investor for that business. And one of the things too I want to transition into is the impact of AI with these types of leads, because historically, the password leads was an amazing entry point, and it still is, but we have to make sure that we have, again, the appropriate systems to communicate with that type of lead. As you heard Lauren mention, maybe speed to lead is not the best way to interact with that consumer. Maybe it's a different type of system that we need ultimately set up to effectively have those communications with that consumer. And here's what AI has done there. If you can imagine, password leads and request response leads both have a different cost per lead, a CPO. In a lot of markets, a password lead could range from $10 a lead to maybe $100 a lead. A request response leads come at a higher premium. These are leads that typically would cost, 3x, 4x, 5x, $300, $400, $600 per lead because intent was already established by the person who's sourcing that lead or the company who's sourcing that lead. So what AI has done, it has made it easier for these companies to figure out intent behind the lead. Because as you can imagine, if I'm a Meta or a Google, I will want to sell more leads at the higher premium cost because that's what's going to drive more dollars to my P&L and make me more profitable as an organization. So if I can lean on some of these technologies to understand consumer intent, and then I can sell that lead rather than $10 a lead to $300 a lead, I'm going to be more profitable as an organization. So as agents, we need to understand that the improvements of AI has now made it easier for the Metas and the Googles of the world to ultimately establish intent behind that lead, which will then mean that there's going to be less of those types of immediate consumers that maybe fell through the gaps, that are maybe more of that request response type of lead coming from that forced registration or that password lead, which again, that concept's not to scare you. It's to make sure that you are establishing the appropriate framework if you are choosing to invest in that type of lead, because now less of those immediate leads may be in existence. As you can imagine, for some of these, companies like Meta, they understand behaviors of the consumer. As consumers are searching inside of their Facebooks and searching different things and clicking different buttons, they are driving through their algorithms consumer intent. And if they can find out that that consumer is more than likely going to purchase, they will be selling it at that premium versus that cheaper dollar. Is that things you're seeing on your end, Lauren, as well, in terms of AI and what that means?
I will also say, like, even with the term use of AI, and even going back to like text messages, few years ago, sending that auto text, we were like first in the game on. Sometimes when you have these request response leads, you really want to be careful how fast you trigger that first text message. I don't know when the change came in, but I receive a whole lot less health insurance quotes than I do tree trimmer quotes or roofing quotes these days. But I actually did not request any of this information. So I do press stop and I delete and report them junk. So one of the things I will urge you also to be careful on is how fast you trigger those first text messages. A lot of us use action plans and campaigns within our CRMs, and on those password leads, if we are triggering a text message automatically, we actually are doing ourselves more harm than good. It looks like, and the stats are starting to come out and prove that. Also, seems like we are getting into generations that prefer phone calls. It was weird. We got to text messages, and I'm a text message person. It could be because I'm on Zoom all day, but my father is very much phone calls. My kids are very much phone calls. So it's like we are starting to enter these generations where we're going back to phone calls. So I would be careful on the text messages because these text messages tend to say, I got your inquiry on, and they never inquired. So if you are getting password leads, if you are getting a PPC lead, pay very close attention to what your first text message is, because you do not want to end up blocked. Also, if you have auto texts going out, I would delay them maybe 72 hours if you were on those request response leads. But also, I do recommend start picking up the phone again. We have some lead sources where we have below an 18% text message contact rate. We're above 70% on the phone, though. So we really are seeing data start to change on what is working. So for many years, probably about the past 8 or so, we were very heavy into text message responses. Now we are going very heavy into phone call answers. So one of those trends that we're paying attention to. So if you guys haven't taken a look at your text message campaigns, I strongly urge you to do so and figure out if it's the best text message per species, not source. So look at the species that it is and determine, is this the best text message or email campaign I can send out around it? And then also maybe pivot from text messaging to calling again and see what it can do for your database.
I thought for the longest, Lauren, that I was the only one getting tree trimming quotes. It's 11:30 Eastern, and I've received 3 of them already this morning.
What it is, it's like I get crazy amounts of those.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us here today on Real Estate First Fridays. I'm thinking we're going to have to bring you back one day and talk through that latter subject matter that you discussed, which was, making sure that our phone numbers are not showing up as spam likely, because that's a thing as well that we need to
100%.
overcome in this business. And there are ways that we can warm up our telephone numbers to ensure that we are getting the proper contact rates on the other side. I spoke with an agent the other day, and he's investing a lot of dollars in lead distribution and lead sources and different lead species. And he's like, no one's picking up my number. And I'm like, you know what? Contact this number. Let's see what happens. A number that he was not, in his contact list. And lo and behold, it was showing up as spam likely.
Exactly.
So big reason why no one was picking up his phone, but we'll definitely bring you back and have that conversation. So with that, guys, thank you so much for joining us here this morning on Real Estate First Fridays. If you are available, highly recommend, if you are a solo agent, join us at noon. Matt Hodge and Sunit Agarwal are putting together a presentation on our SPG program. So please, guys, if you are interested, we'll see you at noon on that SPG call. And if not, see you Monday for Motivational Monday. Thank you, guys.